Okay, I'd like to start with a circle that represents the 360 degrees or the full spectrum potential of the psyche. So in a dualistic system, of course, this is pain and joy, beauty and violence, the entire range of, you could call it positive or negative expression of the psyche. Now, what every cult has done in human history is to take a portion of this psyche and black it out, delete it from its conscious place at the table. In the story of Sleeping Beauty, this is the uninvited guest. It is the curse of the uninvited guest. And so all of the relatives are invited except one. And there's always at least one uninvited guest. Now, in the way we hear the story of Sleeping Beauty, we are seeing it through the cultural paradigm. And so in the story of Sleeping Beauty, the reason that this ancestor is not invited is because she's an old hag. She's a horrible witch. And we don't want that energy around here. And yet she comes, because this is the next part of the story, is that every cult, every culture takes an area of the psyche which it's a different area in every culture, and it's a different degree. Some healthy cultures, it's hard to notice the area they are actively attacking and suppressing, whereas other cultures, it's hard to find a single kind of arena of the psyche that is left unblemished and unmolested by constant criticism and attack. But in the story of Sleeping Beauty, the uninvited relative curses Sleeping Beauty, curses the child. The part of the psyche that is not welcome becomes subverted into its dark side. Every single slice of this pie of the psyche has a positive and a negative expression, has a facet that leads towards joy and beauty and love, and has a facet that leads downward towards its polar opposite. And so in this paradigm, Sleeping Beauty is cursed to sleep for 100 years. And there's one blessing. There's one relative who has waited until the curse of the uninvited guest, which in moralistic terms, it's revenge and all of this. But in energetic terms, any single part of the psyche, any single part of who you and I are, that is not welcome at the table of the relationship, that is not welcome at the table of the culture, that is not welcome at the table of the religion or wherever the ecology is, that energy, denied and shamed, enters its dark face and becomes the enemy, becomes the curse of the remaining ecology that is attempting to deny it. As a result, we are sabotaged by our uninvited guests. But it's important to understand that outside of the narrow band thinking of culture, and this is very easy to see if you travel around the world or do anthropological research, is you very quickly find the most absurd things are looked at with complete seriousness and necessity by one culture. I mean, you literally have frantic women saying, no, you don't understand. If you don't sew up your clitoris and, sew up your vagina and cut off your clitoris with a rusty knife, you don't understand. You will not be a woman. This is the most vital transition into womanhood. And you don't want to miss out on this, despite what those idiots in the West are thinking. And then in the, unless we get too snobbish with our certainty about, how bizarre and how inferior other cultures are, we have, plenty of sociopathic, miserable, unhappy men and women in addictive states in America that we just turn a blind eye because of the Rolex, because of the BMW, because this is moving towards civilization, as if somehow these technological advances are inherently superior to the psychological health we have paid as a price in many cases. And so this uninvited guest is the wound in any cult and in any culture. And one of the ways to assess the intelligence and the grace of any systems design, because what we're looking at is family system therapy, cultural system therapy. We're looking at system dynamics. And in a system, you have a breakdown of roles. And the system that has grace has no garbage. The system that is at war with itself has uninvited guests that are deemed, in the old Irish sense, beyond the pale. It was the pagans that were beyond the stone wall of the good Catholic organized British, rule. And then there were the pagans, those wild people that were the uninvited guests in civilization. And they would come in with their wild dances and ruin things and disrupt the order of the civilized thing. And Star Wars, it was the Jedis that were ruining the order in the imperial dictatorship and needed to be crushed. In the United States, it's the war on drugs and the war on black men, and the war on terror. It gets a little bit bizarre at some point to try and terrorize enough people around the world so that there is less terror in the world. I mean, how can you have a war on terror by killing 200,000 innocent Iraqis, as if somehow the terror went down? So we've got, 3,000 Americans terrified. Now we've terrified 200,000, millions, How many people have we terrified in the war on terror? Is it the war on terror, or is it the war to create terror? But these wars are wars within the system, between the part that is denied in any system and the part that is denying that region of the psyche. And so, an individual comes in, every infant comes in with a full spectrum potential, And what they learn very quickly is crying is not welcome around here. Criticism of the father is not welcome around here. Blatant, intelligent comparisons between the dogma and the behavior of the power structure is not welcome around here. I thought Jesus said to love people, and I'm reading here about the fact that they cut off the hands and feet of native people if they didn't swear to love Jesus. I mean, any problem with that? No, that's not welcome around here either. Art is not welcome around here. This isn't. So there's a lot in American culture that is not welcome around here. We don't like gay men. We don't like this. We like people who make money and spend money and fit within this little line of political correctness, and that's what we like. And all this other stuff is uninvited guests. I've just been looking at the story of Hitler's life and how much of him was not welcome around here, and how much integrity he demonstrated as he externalized his treatment by his culture and father and mother and circumstances to the entire world, with the Jews representing his weakness, his hated little boy, that even his own ancestry. And so Alice Miller is doing a wonderful job of weaving some of these connections. But the uninvited guest starts in childhood, where we learn, and of course there's gender stuff. If you're a boy and you like playing with flowers, you learn that that's not welcome around here. If you're a girl and you want to drive a truck, that's not welcome around here. And so the blacked out area, and it's actually a pretty large area in America, so we'll fill this out, Blacked out area is the wound. The wound is the part of the self that is not welcome around here. The wound is the part that is shamed, pathologized, attacked, humiliated mercilessly, bullied, denied, lied to, betrayed. And then there's the good parts. You're supposed to turn your energy over to getting good at this plus this equals this. I mean, do that. Don't have deep feelings and do this. Figure out how to manipulate little numbers, because we like that. We like that in our culture. So what happens with the wound, and I'm starting by differentiating the self, because we all have a wound. Because in order to survive and be tolerated in a culture that has massive taboos against a good portion of the psyche, you have to dissociate and disown from the attacked part of the psyche. You have to dissociate and disown from the attacked part of the psyche and identify with this superiority of the violator and the punitive dictator and abuser of those parts of the psyche. In American households, observing the impact of chauvinism of the masculine, the speaker, not the listener, the giver, not the receiver, the initiator, not the recipient, the leader, not the follower, the get to the point, not the diffuse awareness, the carefully orchestrated masterful plan, not the spontaneity, the incisiveness of strategy and thought, not the presence of feeling. The accumulation of money and material goods, not the felt experience. So there are polarities, and they divide into masculine and feminine. Some languages like French break things down into masculine and feminine. We don't, but the chauvinism of the last 2,000 years of patriarchy systematically, regardless of gender these days, validates masculine energy over feminine energy. And I see this showing up in 1,000 different ways in my interactions with Americans. And it is spreading. The chauvinism is actually spreading. But very much like the experience, if you read the pedagogical dogmas of Europe, the English prep schools and this and that, very much like that, there is a ferocious hatred of vulnerability, of innocence, of naivete, of helplessness, and of weakness. And these energies are all concentrated in children. Because children, in the polarity of old and young, you have children being in the feminine pole, receptive, open, gullible, innocent, helpless, completely they're just responding to everything. They're in the feminine pole in the cycle of life at birth. And in a chauvinistic culture, this is patronized, devalued. So you'll have, of course, women or whoever is raising the child is, of course, much less valuable than the one who is making money or doing some masculine accomplishment. So the chauvinism that values the masculine, the speaker more than the listener, and is very deeply ingrained. It's about 70-30. So if you are a woman, and you will, I find this in the expression of culture in all of my American interactions. I work for a client, he has a daughter. If he mentions the daughter, it's always in the context of how she's outperforming men. She's not letting those men tell her what to do. She's telling them what to do. In other words, it's her masculine traits. She's a badass. She doesn't let anyone tell her what to do. She's the boss. That's my girl. So she's masculine, and I'm proud of her. And he's masculine, and he's doing this and he's doing that, and I'm proud of her. Or, I don't know what's up with my kids. They're just kind of feeling their way through life. I wish they'd get to the point. I wish they'd add some focus. It's kind of diffused. I don't know what they're up to. They have feelings of, it's like too much. I don't want to deal with that. And the women in my life, the American women that break down into tears because we're talking about something sensitive. It's always, I'm sorry. Just give me a moment. Let me get myself together. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I think I need a little bit of time. Let me excuse myself, because we all know that being emotional, and particularly losing control of the feminine self in the moment, is a shameful phenomena in a chauvinistic culture. It's wow, let's join in and cry. Let's hear what it's about. Let's stop the factory floor. Let's stop the money-making machines. Let's stop the fanatical addictive behavior. Slow down and let's feel into this. Now we're talking feminine culture. Now we're talking, let's sing these tears. Let's feel it. Let's join together. Let's own this grief together. Now we're talking feminine. You ever seen that in America? I haven't. Now we're talking feminine. But the feminine is something to be apologized for and is shamefaced. And I know this, of course, as a contractor, because I watch my value go up and down 30-40% based solely. It's not even, because I'm very efficient. I've learned my masculine role well. So I can make money, get to the point, manage a process. 80% of my jobs are done early. They're all done on budget. I do what I say. I respond to communication the same day, etc. So we've got that covered. But in the typical professional stereotype, and this is just completely made up, cults make things up and they ensure compliancy with the same brainwashing of any cult. You get excluded. So basically what a cult has, and then whenever it's big enough we call it a culture, but what a cult has over an individual being born into it is every single human being has the need to survive, to feel secure in that survival and belong. Well, the cult holds the strings. So what the cult says is, okay, fine, you want all that? Fine, we got it. We got you covered. Here's what you have to do. We don't want your tears. We don't want this. We don't want that. What we want is this, get to the point, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, da-da-da-da-da. We want you to be focused on money, not feelings. Got that? Okay. Now, if you'll just do that, we've got lots of money for you. We've got lots of little badges for you and prestiges. You're the top of the line cult member. So we're ready for you. You've just got to conform to the cult. And if you don't, well, we don't really like to go into this because, we're hoping you just see how superior we are automatically. But, we will not give you work. We'll banish you. We'll gossip about you. We'll sneer at you. We won't give you any of those little badges. We won't give you very much green paper. We'll do this, that, and the other. And if you don't, well, it's up to you. But you don't want to be one of those people, do you? No, you don't want to be one of those people. You want to be one of these people. It's so easy. Could you just straighten your shirt and do this and comb your hair and just be one of those people. And so, we have the taboo. So the three parts of an individual are the innate probability field that we all come in with, that 360-degree expression of the psyche. The wound, which is the systematized brainwashing of every cult that says, we don't want this. But now there's a problem, because by the time you've dissociated, now you identify, you've still got this part, and this part is good. And you've got the identification. What happens when you're very, very helpless, and for example, being beaten as I was, when you're very, very helpless, and no one is listening to the grief, it's so painful, and it is so lonely, and it's so terrifying. But the people that are supposed to protect you and stuff, and stop this from happening, they're actually the ones doing it. And there's nowhere to go. And there is literally an experience of rupture and collapse within the portions of the psyche that are being attacked with giant hatred. Meaning you're 3-4 years old, 20 pounds, whatever, and they're 30-foot tall giants, 2 tons relative in scale. I mean, just imagine some giant grabbing you, right now. Just reach through the wall, grab you. You haven't done what you're told. It's like you'd freak out because the scale is suddenly taking you back to what it's like to be a child. They're 30 feet and 2 tons, and you're 6 foot and 200 pounds, and it's like, I can't do it. This is traumatic. I have got to do what these giant, crazy people want. And one of the big things that happens is that, particularly when abuse gets passed on, which it typically does in Western culture, abuse happens mercilessly. It happened with Hitler and a lot of the SS people. If you look at the biographies, and it's very interesting to find how much defense. Like, it'd be interesting to see, as an American, if you're skeptical, if you're defending, or if this makes perfect sense, and why. Where is that skepticism coming from? Where is the defense? Who in each of us is defending what? For what purpose? Because what an increasing amount of data is showing is that when it is too unbearable to identify, because within any dynamic, there's both sides of us. There is the aggressor, and then there's the victim, and that exists in both sides of us. But when the victim is too brutally beaten, shamed, and humiliated for the conscious self to tolerate it without just wanting to die and give up and collapse, what happens to survive is that the person dissociates from the little person being whacked by a belt or whatever it is, and goes over and identifies, looking into the eyes of this person who says, I'm doing this for your own good, and blah, 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 identifies with the abuser and idolizes the abuser. I want to be like them, and they actually transfer identification to where they're feeling the tremendous power. 30-foot giant just trouncing this 6 foot tall, 200 foot nothing. It's like, yes, I'm going to beat you, and I'm beat you again. And I see every little bit of helpless despair. And yes, you just get it, going to get it. It's like the power of a 30-foot giant attacking a puny 200 pound, 6 foot, human being. The power. And it's like, I want to have that power. That power is good. Of course, it's power over domination. And so the journey goes from Saddam Hussein, Pol Pot, Hitler, etc. The journey goes from that helplessness into power, identifying with the abuser. And this is actually a very interesting dynamic that there's an element of this in the high dynamic. There's the complete helplessness and falling apart, edge of insanity, panic, profound loneliness, deep pleading, deep stuff. Down, that's not us. That we don't want anything to get out of here. We want nothing to do with you. Because what happens in a cult environment when you banish a part of the self is first of all, it's pretty consistent, meaning the cult memes. Now, the trouble is, every system has to express the full circle. There's nowhere for this energy to go. So you come in with this full spectrum of colors. So it's kind of like you get a paint palette. So you've got the reds, this. And the culture says, no red. That's too violent. And we don't want any yellow. That seems innocent and cheerful, and we're more sophisticated. We want browns and taupes around here. So get that out. And oranges, that's a little bit bold for this, for this era. Get that one out. So these are the good colors. You see, the trouble is the suppressed and denied colors have nowhere to go. Sure, you can dissociate, but within within the psyche, there is no garbage. Every single energy and every single facet on the wheel. In fact, for the wheel to turn as a wheel gracefully, every single spoke on that wheel has got to make contact with the ground. See, in other words, if the wheel is turning, okay, you're somber and serious and sophisticated, you're witty, okay, a little bit enthusiastic, but of course apologizing for that, good. You caught that, good. The wheel is turning, and then we come into, there's grief. It's like, what? Grief? That's not welcome around here. So the brakes go on. The wheel stops turning. That bit cannot make contact with reality. Now, we've got a problem though. Where's that grief going to go? And this is where transference comes in, because the grief is there as an energy. It's particularly there when you've got large parts of the psyche dissociated, because that's a horrific state of consciousness. So the grief is there, but what the power structure has to do, or what the people who are occupying the desirable position, so who are those? So usually it's the people in the most power, and also the people who are most sociopathic, meaning they're the most comfortable and the most far removed from their own dissociated parts. These people do very well in climbing high within the social cult sanctioned position, whatever it is. So you'll find hedge fund managers, you'll find military generals, you'll find Donald Trump, you'll find people that are very comfortable living in the part of their psyche and disowning the part of their psyche that is not popular, that is taboo. The trouble is that Donald Trump feels helpless. Donald Trump feels weak. Donald Trump feels terrified. Donald Trump feels shame. Donald Trump feels uncertain and confused. Donald Trump feels terrified of being no one. So all of these things that are American taboos exist within the ecology of each person, etc. And so what tends to happen, so for example, my father, who was absolutely determined not to go into grief at, and helplessness, when he was like places in his emotional psyche where, those were the parts that were being beaten or were being attacked, were completely hated and alienated by his parents. And when you come in as a new baby, you've got access to the full self. And what the parents have to do, preferably before the child goes to school, is dull out all the unwanted parts of the self. They try and do this as nicely as possible. You don't want it. No, that's not how little boys. No. Try and do it as nicely as possible if they can, get away with it, particularly in current hip, families. But if necessary, beat them, shake them, threaten, terrorize, whatever it is. Do bribery, the whole thing, to get conformity, not with the optimum expression of the individual and the optimum self, but to get conformity with the cult. Little boys your age go to school. Well, why? Well, that's what we do. Why? To learn things. Well, what are we learning? Well, you're going to learn algebra. Wait a minute, I've never seen you and Dad use algebra. No, we don't use algebra, but that's what you're going to learn. Well, why are we going to learn that? Well, we don't talk about that. What else we're going to learn? History. Well, you haven't told me anything about our history or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I've kind of forgotten that. Well, why aren't we learning skateboarding or cooking or something useful? Well, that's an interesting question, but we don't have time for that. You've got to go to school, so you've got to fit in with this. And this doesn't like this, so we're kind of fine with you putting a little lipstick on and this and that and the other, but you don't want to do that in class, or this culture makes it very easy for bullies to hurt you, and you don't want that to happen. No, I don't want to. Well, so just don't wear lipstick, and it won't, you see. Just hide this part, hide this. Oh, and don't. It's probably better not to do this either. You don't want to. No, definitely don't do that. Yeah. Could you just please mommy and daddy by hiding all this stuff that you are, and then don't be interested in this, and then sure, that could be interesting, but we filled up your entire schedule with all this nonsense, and so just go and do that, and you won't have time to discover if you have psychic powers, or you won't have time to learn to express your feelings or anything like that. So just go. What happens is that the most sociopathic, the people with the least empathy, the people that are most able to just turn off and pretend and mask out these parts of themselves that are not welcome, rise to the top. So they get the top position in the cult. The next positions come to their lieutenants and different things, and they often have some mild failings within the culture, but that can be, brushed under the rug as long as you don't show it in public. So then there's like, my wife's boyfriend is a Jew. Well, don't worry about that. You can work for the Nazis. We like you. We know you're a good, loyal person. But you probably want to, stop seeing them, and maybe you want to, send them off to the country so that, you're towing the line here. And so it's, so and then it kind of goes down, and this, But what tends to happen is that these people in the top positions do have undesirable traits, undesirables. And of course they don't want to admit it, because their whole role is that of suppressing people who are those traits over here. So, we don't like lazy people, we like hardworking people. So what? You're grieving the loss of your dad, you don't feel like working. Oh gosh, I hate this. So what tends to happen is a transference through an irrational dump of rage and shame, where they start to enter terrain that is taboo, and then they'll deflect, and they've got the power to transfer the emotion. You see, so so Peter Sandhill is in this light of I love so much, and I'm teaching workshops on love, intimacy, and sexuality, and a facilitator and therapist, and I'm this and I'm that, and I'm all this great stuff, but something's coming up and I'm scared. I don't know how to deal with this. I wasn't expecting this, this and that, this fear coming up. Well, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, this doesn't fit with the image. I'm super confident. I know what I'm doing. You just need to do what I say to do, and it'll all be great, because I'm a great this, and I'm a great this, etc. But someone's got to own the fact that when there is a breach in integrity, a breach in fear, or a breach in technique. For example, if I say, sure, drive a 100-ton truck over this pen and it's going to be good, just trust me on this, and you drive a 100-ton truck over the pen, it's splattered to bits, and the truck falls into a ravine. Well, that's obvious. There's something wrong there. Now the question is, what do you do with that? Well, you can say, oh, you didn't put the pen right. You didn't do this, you didn't do that, whatever. Or you can say, no, I wasn't trained. I didn't do metal analysis on the tensile strength of this pen. I just made that up, hoping it would work out. It didn't. And I've been caught with my pants down, and I'm sorry. And, a whole truck to get out of the ravine, and I should be involved. I should get that truck out, because you wouldn't have done that if I hadn't said I knew what I was doing and just go here. But what happens? Trump doesn't make mistakes. The power structure doesn't like to descend from its superhuman, we don't make mistakes, we're going to transfer this all on you. And so a game gets played with the power structure where let's see if we can't transfer our fear, our uncertainty, our shame onto someone who's lower down the rung. Now, this is where sensitives come in. The most feminine and the most sensitive, two things that are highly hated in the culture. Not personal, but in an abusive, traumatized culture, the feminine is the part that takes the abuse the most. The feminine is the most capable of being abused within men and women. Meaning, let's say you hate someone and you're trying to hurt them. The feminine in each of us is the emotional self. So that is the part that feels the hurt. If you have a con artist in the mix, someone who is in a sociopathic state, who's in so much survival and security that they're just going around trying to rip people off, then it's the one who trusts the most, who's open, that gets hurt by the con artist. It's the people that say no and use analytical analysis and stuff to say no, that show me your record, give me references, That's all masculine, protection and stuff. It's the feminine that says yes. The masculine says, hey, how about this? The masculine says, no, not in this and this. How about this instead? And it's the masculine that negotiates. The feminine says, yes, yes. In man or woman, it doesn't matter. It's the feminine that says, yes. That creates flow. How about this? Yes. Now you've got flow. Now you've got connection. Now you've got dynamic movement. How about this? No, you don't have anything. How about that? No, you don't have anything. You have two masculine standoffs. How about this? Yes. So in a healthy dynamic, it's the job of the masculine in men and women to invite something intelligent. Well, what is intelligent? What is intelligent is something that's good for the entire system, as opposed to playing one persona off against the other, or pretending that there can be any winners in a gender combat. In other words, you delete the negative side of the battery and keep the positive side of the battery, you don't have electricity. You need the balanced polarity. You need someone to say, how about this? How about a walk in the park? And you need someone else to say, yes. That's when things start to happen. Now, this is not gender specific. It's just that because of hormones, women are a little bit more predisposed to the feminine pole. And because of culture, that is exaggerated in many of our traditional cultures over the last 10,000 years. So what happens is this phenomena of transference, where the people in the top who don't want to ever feel helpless again, who hate helpless people, they hate them, get rid of them, lock them up, the scum, that hatred is driven by the disowned self, meaning there was a lazy, tired, this part of the self. It was punished, it was shamed, it was terrorized, in infancy. The people at the top were the most effective at stomping that out, at shaming it, of making it bad, of saying that I want nothing to do with me. That is not me. And I hate people who are lazy, and I hate people who, don't have initiative and don't have a plan and don't push past their pain threshold into being a superachiever. I hate them. Just get them out of here. Well, the people who are hated, the people who do not receive the protection of the cultural mantle of acceptability, people who are not getting their security, survival, belonging needs met because they're being attacked. The most vulnerable, the most feminine, and the most sensitive, and the most young members of any cult will end up occupying and holding space for the energy that the cult system has denied. Now, this is particularly tragic because the people who are the most sensitive, well, first of all, one of the scientific reasons for this is that you all know the phenomena of the pink elephant in the room. Well, sensitives feel that pink elephant more than almost anyone else. And that energy is trying to enter the space. And everyone's suppressing it because it's a bit like when you have a taboo energy in the space, and in any system that has any taboo, there is taboo energy in the space. Because the full spectrum of energy is there in each one of us. And what taboo says is you can't talk about it, you can't acknowledge it, you can't own it, you can't be valuable and be associated with it, so that's all taboo. So then the question becomes, who's going to be the scapegoat? Who's going to be, the scapegoat was literally a goat that would be smeared with the blood and sent out to horror to feel the pain of a community. That's the scapegoat, the goat that was, ladled with all the fears, all the pains, all the blame, you will be sent out as the sacrificial goat. And we, of course, are so much more civilized than the tribes that smeared blood on goats and sent them out in the desert. So we do this with our sensitives, with our children, with those who are most poor. We create energy systems that, of course, first of all, let's be honest. For the bicycle to turn, for the bicycle wheel to turn, every single energy has to be honored in some way. So lust is not welcome in this cult. Okay, so all the powerful people have no lust, What do you do with lust? Okay, here's what we do. We create brothels and we put security guards and the top people, for considerable sums of money that bribe this to be silent, whatever, and we'll kill the girls if they talk. The top people can come and experience their lust, but nobody else can. And so that's how we solve that one. So now the wheel can turn. We're not, we've got a way to lubricate that energy through. And then what do we do with the violence that we're all so pious and all that? We kill the infidels. We kill the infidels. We kill the Jews. These horrible people. We make a scapegoat, and for them, that's fine. To be polite, have to be kind and spiritual, but the fucking Trump, polite and kind. You create a scapegoat that's there to be the villain, to be the embodiment of what we're not. We have nothing to do with things like that. So the wheel gets to turn. So it is the lowest status people that get the roles of the denied energy, and the price or the benefit of that is they get to survive. And the price is they get shamed and demonized for playing a role that ought to be honored, but is in fact persecuted. Now, both the people playing the shittiest roles in a system, the key is that it is a system that creates garbage. The garbage comes the moment you say, all this is okay in me, in the world, etc., but this is not. This is undesirable. This is garbage. So there's a system that creates garbage. Now, it's not surprising that in the Western world, unlike tribal worlds, in the Western world, where there is a tremendous amount of psychological garbage. You know, we don't like people who are illiterate. We don't like people who are poor. We don't like people who are women. We don't like people who are black. We don't like people, you know, and I'm just speaking some of the many candid prejudices of a sick society. We don't like followers. We don't like this. We don't like weak people. We don't like people who are needy. We don't like any of this. We don't like most of human potential. We like white, smart, tall, sociopathic, articulate, shrewd, dominant people that for the good of everyone else do, you know, get rich and do this and that and the other, manipulate world dynamics. That's what we like. And we want to be part of those crowd. We want our kids to be part of those crowd. Okay, we don't want to seem inhumane about these other poor, you know, factions, you know, these weird people with rings in their noses and tattoos and this and that and the other. It's like, but, you know, we don't want to be politically incorrect. We're gonna, because we're better than that, you know. So there's this whole dance with who's beyond the pale, who's outside the system, and who's in, and who's very in because they can manipulate and get the votes of all these people, and then secretly betray them behind back doors. And we all know, you know, we had to say those things in front of the thing, but to our people, this is how we are. I mean, we know this is how we have to run a country and stuff like that. So, you know, yes, we have to get the young vote and stuff, but we're going to betray it. You know, we're going to betray it because we know how the country should be. We're going to go. We're going to go that. We all know, right? So this is the cult meme. You know, the definition of a cult is the more you knows you have. Everyone knows because they've had this part beaten out of them and shamed since birth, and they've had this part exonerated, and everyone gets to see who's, you know, raises to the top and this and that and the other. And sure, you can break the rules. If you're really rich, you can have feelings or, you know, behave outside the norm or, you know, things like that. You're really smart, you can have weird hair or whatever it is. The wound creates enormous pain in the psyche. Pain is a separation from and a longing for. We all long for every part of us to be integrated and welcome at the table. This is the deepest longing of every human being. To be integrated, to have integrity, to have our shadow, our light, the stuff that this cult says is horrible, the stuff that this cult says is beautiful, the whole spectrum of raw materials, present, honored, welcome at the table. We long for that, and we don't have it. We long for it, and we don't have it. This creates enormous pain. It's a very, very deep pain. It is a schism of the renting of the self, of the psyche, into good parts and bad parts and this part and that part. And the way to measure any healthy culture is by how much garbage it generates. Because in the paradigm outside the cult, it's all energy. It's all potential. And it's what you do with it and how you integrate it and how you play with it that matters. Now, a poorly designed system generates a lot of waste. A very poorly designed system, you got about, this part of me I like, and all this other stuff I don't like. This part of the world I like, and all this other part I don't like. I like this pen, but the plastic that it comes wrapped in, that's garbage. The other plastic that carry it, the box, that's garbage. I like this board, but the box it came in, that's garbage. And garbage is stuff that has no use. Just get it away from me. And so the very idea of garbage, it's a paradigm. It is a paradigm that says that which has no value, that which is left over after the valuable part has been extracted. The paradigm of garbage presupposes a lack of imagination, a lack of ecological thinking, a lack of holistic thinking, and builds on the paradigm that some parts of me are garbage and some parts of you are garbage, and some people who are mostly that part, those whole people, they're just garbage. Like I've got a lazy side, so I'm a bit of garbage, but there are some people, they're just lazy all the time, and they are complete garbage, right? So this is a paradigm that says this is good, this is bad, and the more bad stuff is, the more garbage to result there is. And so, and depending on what the goal is, determines how much garbage there is. So if you go into a huge copper strip mine, for example, the only thing they want in that is the copper. So there is an enormous amount of garbage. Maybe 95% of everything they're doing in there is garbage. And 5% is good. That's not garbage. We want this 5%. Kill the forest, kill the water, kill this, kill that, kill the mountain, kill this. None of that. We don't want any of that. We want this 5%. What are you going to do with all the rest of it? Well, this doesn't matter. We'll just leave it when we're done. That's garbage. We don't need that. This thinking is a symptom of a lack of imagination. Meaning, good system design has zero garbage. Good system design begins with the whole in mind. There's no part of the psyche that doesn't have a role. There's no person that doesn't have value. There's no item or material that doesn't have its place in the evolution of life. And if we want to be more than garbage designers, it's up to us to evolve the design paradigm beyond garbage. What happens when you are in enormous pain, separation from and longing for, is you need an addictive coping mechanism. When you split the self, it is one pain that you cannot just not do something about, because you've created civil war here. You've got this part at war with this part saying it has no value, it shouldn't exist and all that. And most of the energy of this part has to go into suppressing, lying, deviating, deflecting. One of the most common phenomena in abusive families is that the father, who can't make mistakes, who can't show grief, who can't feel helpless, who can't not know, because these are all shamed things for men in our historical stereotypes. You don't know? Shut up. So of course, fathers do make mistakes. They don't know 99.9% of what there is to know. They are helpless at times. There's plenty of forces bigger than them that they're not in control of. They can lose their job, etc. So they're supposed to be this, and they're supposed to not be this, but forces outside of their control regularly shove them into the taboo terrain, creating shame, rage, helplessness, The people who are in power, and fathers are in control of their children, particularly when they're 2, 5 years old, can transfer the helplessness, particularly when people are, look, like, Dad, do you not know what you're doing? Is that what's going on here? Shut up. Now, the boy is crying and in shock, and of course can't ask another question, or if he does, he gets a lot bigger whap. And now the father has masked the fact that he doesn't know what he's doing, and the boy was asking why. Because the father doesn't want to be caught in the shame created by the culture, because the culture is saying men should always know what they're doing, or at least really smart, sexy, on top men. They always have a plan. They're always on top of it. And the really sexy, smart women go with the most sociopathic men who outsmart everyone else, and then they get to be the successful couple on top of the cultural power game. So the parents, of course, go into this, the father, in particular, because he's got the most rigidity in our culture. It's very paradoxical the way that you look at Trump, and on the one hand, he's given all the perks, and on the other hand, he's got the most rigid role to play. Trump can't cry and be a president. He can't not know stuff and be a president. He can't do any of that and play the stereotypical role. Of course, he makes plenty of mistakes and all that, and so this has to be deflected on someone with less power. And it's perfectly understood that that's got to happen. He's got to fire this person. He's got to blame that person. He's got to lie. He's got to do all this stuff to deflect his incompetence onto those beneath him. And he does that. And we're not particularly surprised, because we've watched our parents do that our entire lives, You said you would do this, Mom, and you didn't, and it hurt my feeling. Don't you talk to your mother like that. How dare you? Go to your room. In other words, we didn't make a mistake. You are so dumb that first of all, you completely misremembered things. Third, you had the audacity to think that you could have your own feelings. What an idiot. I get to have feelings, you don't. Thirdly, you think you can just speak the truth in this household and get respect, go to your room. And so now the child feels all the smallness that the parent felt when they realized, oh my God, maybe I can't be a parent. Even my kid is seeing that I don't know what I'm doing. What am I going to do? I don't know. It's like, you fucking kid making me feel this way. Get out of here. And the kid holds it. And then the parent says, well, I guess that's what I do. Anytime I'm a perfectly great parent. Anytime my kid questions me, I'll just shout at them, beat them, do this and that and the other. And once they submit in cowed, traumatic terror, I will know that I've done my job. And that kind of rings a bell. Yeah, that's what my parents did to me. So all's well. And yes, it's a wonderful family. So there's the coping mechanism that comes to deal with the pain. And the coping mechanism is addictive. It's compulsive because this pain is so big. Whenever it shows its head, like every so often the wheel is turning, it's like, oh my God. all of my rage, all of my terror, all of my helplessness, all of my incompetence, all of my sensitivity, all of my hurt, all of my grief is about to hit the fan. And I'm not supposed to have any of that. That's very uncool. Da, 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 da. And the fact that I'm not supposed to have any of it makes it worse, meaning I've got more grief because I don't get to express my grief. So there's the grief of not being able to express grief. So it gets getting bigger all the time. And it's like, that's not supposed to be happening. So I've got to do something. And this is where addiction comes in. Addiction is narrow band, rapid, repetitive behavior that serves to focus the brain deeply in an area that is anywhere other than the pain. Whatever it is, a drug, porn, sex, racing, buying things, making money, working hard, whatever it is, as long as it either physically removes things, as in the case of a drug, or distracts me, like just shuts the whole liver down or does this, or it's crisis. Crisis is a big thing my parents used when they were getting close to shame. They would manufacture crisis in the most absurd ways. And then they would rush around and pretend that they had to solve the crisis immediately. Shut up, we've got this crisis. And it's like, no, we don't have a crisis. You just said, suddenly, we have to go on vacation and it's urgent. And then you buy a ticket for tomorrow. Well, you didn't have to do that. You could have not gone. You could have bought it in 2 days. You could have bought it in 3 days. You could have had as much time as you wanted. But you had to create a crisis, didn't you? I know, I've got to get to this meeting. You don't understand, I just got a text. My grandfather has died. An old man died. You haven't talked to him in years. What the fuck does that have anything to do with anything? He's dead. So? Plenty of people die. You have to create a crisis out of that? It's like, no, I don't have to. Plenty of relatives have died, this and that. But you see, at this moment, we've got a shit hitting the fan type of emotion coming up, and I've got to do something to divert it. So, and I can't just admit it. I mean, the whole lie is that I don't have any of this. So I can't say that I've got to create a crisis or got to be busy or could you distract me or could I shout at you so that I don't have to feel these feelings, because we're living the lie that I don't have these feelings, that these things aren't there, that these personas don't exist, and so that wouldn't work. So we've got to further the lie. So the first lie is these things are not there. The second, no, I don't feel helpless. I don't have any needs. I don't have any, everything's cool. Everything's cool. As sociopathic as you can be, cool. Everything's cool. So now we got to invent something to distract from the fact that everything isn't cool. This coping strategy is more important than any other part of the self when this part is in wound. And the reason it is because the entire lie and power structure collapses within the psyche and within the cult if this stuff comes to light. This is why we use the most bizarre science and tactics to shut the 60s down. Stuff was coming to light. We can't have that. We can't have it. Just ban it all. Schedule 1. I don't care what it is. Mushrooms, this, get it out of there. Shut it down. Lock 2% of the population up. I don't care. Shut it down. We can't have this stuff coming to light. Let's bomb another country. Let's do this. We got to do something. We can't deal with this stuff. We can't deal with our shadow. The shadow is the cursed self, the part that we go to war with in order to survive. The coping strategy, the addictive coping mechanism, takes priority over all relationships, over all healthy self-thing. because it is pinned to the survival contract of the individual in an unhealthy cult. So your kid needs some loving attention because her feelings are hurt, and you've got to take your beer to manage your shame. The kid just gets brushed aside and you have your beer. The kid needs some tutoring to help with this and that and the other, but you've got to go on a shopping spree to manage your anxiety and pain. Kid doesn't get a tutor. The shopping spree happens. Your husband is feeling insecure and unimportant and lonely because you're putting in too much time at work because you're really nervous about certain hatreds that are coming up that you don't want to deal with because you're not a hateful person, but you feel these hatreds. So you're just working more and more hours. He's feeling more and more lonely. He asks for your time. Out of the question. Honey, you got to understand. You got to understand we're part of the cult. And in this cult, we work more than any other cult. We put in more hours, less vacation. I thought you were a civilized person. You understood that you don't just slack off and build our marriage when we're addictively getting stuff done. So addiction comes before anything healthy in this arena. And then hopefully this arena is good, although it's often out of balance with all the suppressed energy over here. And what all this leads to is an important question. How do you heal the system? So first of all, every single system has some percentage that is taboo. And it usually has a taboo about naming it taboo. Because that starts to question the taboo. Like as soon as you say, don't ever talk about your grandmother at the table, and you say that at the table, where everyone hears, then it's like, well, why? And there's a question of dissent. But if you whisper it to your 6-year-old little girl, here, I'll give you a lollipop. Now, don't talk about that. Why? No. Just go in there. Just don't talk about your grandmother. Got that? Okay, here's the lollipop. And there's all these little codes that keep the contract of the family opaque. It's very clearly written, we don't talk about this, we don't talk about that, we don't allow this feeling, we don't allow that feeling, we don't allow this person to have leadership, we don't allow power to be equal here, we don't do this, we can't talk about the fact that we don't do this, we don't do that. We can somewhat talk about it because we've got a good explanation for why we don't do that, but we still don't do it. And it's a shaky explanation, but we don't do this, we don't do this. And down here, if you want to survive, just sign here. Contracts of shame and taboo. So to heal a system, the very first place to begin, in a Western culture, you've got to hear all this. Because one of the big things that are shunted off is body language, body messages, body authenticity, and emotions are part of the taboo. Now these are the most effective ways of healing a sick culture, is to listen to your body and listen to your deep emotions. So the culture has to take that offline, or it threatens the power structure of the cerebral left lineal masculine brain in the chauvinistic pyramid. The chauvinistic Western pyramid is the white sociopathic left brain is up at the top with all kinds of dogmatic, traumatic rules for keeping it that way. And everything else is below that. So to topple that, you need to actually, in a Western brain, you've got to actually engage that part of each one of us. I've been rewarded my entire life for my left linear articulating brain, knowledge, competency, achievements, etc. All that masculine quadrant. So that part has to get the message that, for example, I mean, you educate that brain with things like the bicycle wheel and stuff, where it's like, well, would you think it was intelligent left brain to design a bicycle that just didn't have all of these things? It would just delete it. Would you ride that bike? Or why wouldn't you? Because there'd be this huge bump, because it would be very inefficient, because these parts would have to have extra energy, because the circle is a much more elegant design. So why would you block it out? Oh, well, you just got to do that. Well, rational brain, you're saying you're rational. That's not a rational answer. You've just got to. Let's break it down. Rational brain. Mr. Scientist, let's do some science about science. So you have to engage the rational brain. Now, once the rational brain is on board, usually because things have gotten painful enough that feelings have got to be acknowledged, the most important place to start is putting more parts of the self online. Why? Because this is generating the pain. Now, in order to do this, one is going to have to face the grief of living a life without part of ourselves online and losing out on the whole experience of being human in that domain. So there's grief and reclaiming that has to happen. Now, this has just taken the third of the pain offline. Now, grieving has taken the unexpressed grief offline, meaning it's now the unexpressed grief no longer takes energy to suppress. The unexpressed grief sensitizes the emotional self to feel other feelings that are beneath the grief that couldn't be felt because the grief was so loud. The reclaimed bit of self, maybe I'm allowing myself to be playful and call that valuable, is actually feeding energy back in the self. It is also not being suppressed. It is now able to perform its role in the system. And as this happens, you need less addiction to manage the pain because there's less pain. So you actually want to tackle, if it's a very debilitating addiction, you know, heroin or something, you got to tackle the physical addiction first. I've never been addicted to a substance like that I couldn't kick, or, you know, sugar is a very big addiction. I'm addicted to sugar. But I have gone on months at a time without any sugar diets and gotten through the huge withdrawal and misery of it all and been able to, you know, to cope. But it's not a very debilitating addiction in the short run. It's killing me, but it's not a very debilitating in the short run. And so with that kind of addiction, you actually want to heal the pain. And the place to look is exactly where the cult is the most shaming. So if having strong emotions is the most shaming and taboo thing in your cult, okay, go explore your strong emotions and find out how beautiful they are. Get to know them. Because one of the little tricks that cults play when they want to do something like banish strong emotions is it's a setup. So they say strong emotions are bad. You say why? And they say, well, just look at that person. And you look at that person and they're bursting out and they can't control their behavior, and you say, oh gosh, I don't want to be like that. And then you ask yourself, well, how did they get that way? That person had feelings when they were a child and were told to shut up. They had feelings a little bit later and they were hit. They had feelings and they were teased and bullied. And then they tried to suppress their feelings. And then they exploded. Then they felt shame about that. Then they took on that this was their fault. Then they felt humiliated. Then they had feelings about that and they started drinking. Then they felt like they're a shit because they're drinking. And then one day all of this came to a head and they exploded. In other words, the culture tormented this individual's emotional state, self, into such a state of dysfunction and horror that they can barely function. And then the culture says, see, that's what happens when you have emotions. You don't want any of those. As opposed to That's exactly why you want to express your emotions every day, so that we don't torment you into that state of dysfunction. And this is all our doing. If we'd been a healthy culture that spent 2 or 3 hours talking about feelings every day and embracing and dancing and da-da-da-da-da, you would never see someone falling apart the way you do in the West. You'd see healthy tribal people without cancer, without this and that and the other, who are doing a great life, who aren't obese and all that. You'd see those people. But we don't see those people here. And it becomes a self-perpetuating loop where don't feel feelings. The kids try and put up with this pattern until it makes them sick. Then they express the sickness of dysfunctionally suppressed feelings, and then that's used to then shame them again. Don't feel feelings. See how you are when you feel feelings. And it's just a vicious circle. So you reclaim that. And you work with it until you build the muscles of the reclaimed self to where you can see, wait a minute, I've been told all my life that I'm a creep and I'm a da-da-da-da-da because of this. I'm told all my life I'm too sensitive. I've been told all my life I'm too emotional. I'm too this, I'm too that. No, I just have to find the place around the globe, because that's the key, where this part is normal, where this part is welcome, because there are other cults out there that say, oh no, that's fine here. Just don't you dare do this in that cult. But you can feel, oh fine, we're comfortable with feelings in this cult, just not over in this cult. So you reclaim the self more and more. And the place to do this from is the complete belief that every single part of the self, just like the full chemistry set, like you have the basic elements. Well, a chemist will never tell you that a single element, sulfur may have a bad smell, but it has a role to play in chemistry. Concrete may be sticky and you don't want to, it makes your hands dry if you touch it when it's wet, but it has a role to play. Sap from trees may be uncomfortable on BMWs, but trees play an important role in our ecology. So cut all the trees down for the BMWs is not necessarily an intelligent thing. Oh, I don't want any sap on my new car. Let's cut that tree down. I wish that was a fictional example. That's a pretty common request. Every part of the self has a role to play in a dynamic, healthy self. Rage, envy, hate, beauty, ecstasy, joy, pain, misery, despair, helplessness. Every single part has a role to play in giving messages, in restoring imbalance, in revitalizing, in stopping the exhaustion cycle. And the key is to start picking those things. Oh, okay. Everyone in this culture apologizes for being too emotional. Let's try being more emotional than any of them. It's a good place to start. Let's see what happens. What emotions come up? How can I create a safe place where the whole cult doesn't start attacking me? Because that is one of the big, the trauma of scaring people within an inch of their life, socially, financially, etc., is the way that people get bullied into not honoring who they are at a given table. Well, of course, one thing you do is just stop showing up at those tables. Certain tables are determined to be sick tables, and so you've got to find a table that has room for you. This is not doing that table any great service. When I left my family system at 17, to get out of there, to, etc., it didn't help my family any, but it helped me significantly to start finding places where, for example, I could start talking about feelings again without being humiliated and beaten. So as you reclaim more and more of the taboo faces of self, they stop being the curse, the aunt that seems to curse us. It's like every time I'm just about to make a breakthrough, And then my body collapses. You horrible body, you just ruin, I hate you. The repressed, denied parts of self stop cursing us when we invite them to the table. You know, when you listen to your body and say, oh, you need a rest, let's rest, then the body doesn't sabotage and collapse at the critical moment. So but to do that, for that to make sense, you've actually got to honor the value of the body, or the value of sleep, or the value of laziness, the value of unstructured thought before going to structure, the value of deep downtime for high you've got to acknowledge the roles of polarity. You got to acknowledge the feminine principle. I mean, such a delightful, anyway, I'll talk about my personal stuff later, but you want to heal the denied part of self. The more you do it and invite it in, the more life and light comes in, the more the addiction will go down. And I'm not just talking about cocaine or marijuana or sex or alcohol. I'm talking about addiction to work, addiction to thinking, addiction to manically achieving goals, addiction to anxiety, addiction to self-pity, whatever the addiction is. The addiction always serves to numb pain from the unintegrated self. So that's the paradigm that I've been piecing together from different books, courtesy of John Bradshaw, courtesy of Alice Miller, courtesy of kind of piecing together the 70 relationships and things that I have, courtesy of watching what's going up and down. But one of the ways to take this into system theory, for example, in a community or a group, is to look at what is and isn't taboo in the community and the group, to examine the positive roles that are not being welcomed, the things that could be played in that group or that system that would revitalize it, that are not being played because they're taboo and censored by the power structure. And then with that awareness to seek, if you're in any kind of an interested party in the community, to seek to revitalize the symmetry of the community by honoring and welcoming the energies that are wanting to come up, and to look for the phenomena where an energy is trying to come forth that looks awkward, politically incorrect, strange, and uncomfortable. These are the repressed parts of the self that are not very familiar. And they're going to stumble as they first come to the table because they've been beaten and hacked and mistreated and malnourished. So they're not going to wander up as great fit athletes. They're going to wander up to the table like beggars, haggard and half dragged clothes, because we've turned those parts we've treated those parts like beggars. But as soon as we treat the beggars like honored guests, they have usually the most pertinent medicine for the table. They know the things that most need to be talked about. They know the energies that are most denied, that are most medicinal. They know the truths that no one else but them will say. And they're too innocent or too I could give a shit to shut up and cover up the lies of the group. So they will bring medicine to a group. Bring the beggars. Bring the homeless. Bring the drug addicts. Bring the abused children to the table. And invite them to play a key role in reshaping the personal life, the community life, etc. Because a system that creates beggars and homeless and addicts is the problem, not the part of the self that is ending up in that slot within a faultily designed system. Good systems don't have garbage. So the key thing to look at, because this is one of the great, reinforced shame stereotype games that cults play, is that you need these people. You need their truths, their energies, for the system to work better than it's working. You need them as much as they need you. But you're too dumb to know it because you've bought into the bigotry, the chauvinism, the superiority of the faulty design. The faulty design that's spitting out garbage without the intelligence to recognize that good designs have no garbage. Zero waste is a good design. How efficient is your design? How much waste is there in you? How much waste is there in work? How much waste is there in your house? Physically, emotionally, psychically, energetically. To the degree that there is waste, stuff that is there that you just want to disappear, you don't want to deal with it, you don't want to transform it into something good, you just want it to go away, is to the degree that you have a simplistic thinking that is going to cause great suffering. And to the degree that you have nothing, where every single thing that shows up is good and useful for something and you welcome it, is to the degree that you dance with life. Thanks for dancing with me.